I feel like one of the luckiest people in the world because I get to spend this time with Lisa Damour. Dr. Lisa Damour, people call you Dr. Damour?
Yeah, Dr. Damour or Lisa, or.
You call yourself Lisa,
Yeah, I usually do.
right?
But I'll tell you something that was interesting. Um, Years ago, somebody was asking me like, what should I call you? And I'm like, oh, you don't need to call me Dr. Demore. You can just call me Lisa. And one of my colleagues of color gave me such helpful feedback. She was like, you know what? It doesn't really help us because when you white people who are dripping in privilege are casual about your titles, as you have room to be, it makes it harder for
Wow.
those of us who really need people to use our professional titles to ask people to do it. So, in the wake of that conversation, I've actually, when people say, should I call you
Yeah.
Lisa? Should I call you Dr. Demore? I'll say, call me Dr. Demore, and I will explain. I think this was a really, really powerful conversation for me personally. I'll explain why. But Harlan, you and I are long good friends, so we're going to call each other Harlan and Lisa if you don't mind me calling you Harlan.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting. I love when I get answers from people that I don't expect because
Yeah.
it's like that's like such a it seems like such a throwaway question to
Mhm.
you, but like you gave me something so good. Like we just started. We're like a minute in and it's like we're jam. This is so good.
Yeah.
Okay, Lisa, I've got so much planned for you because
Okay.
whenever you are just gracious enough to give me your
Oh,
time,
that's so kind.
I want to prepare and I want to make sure. And I don't, you do so many of these
Oh.
podcasts. You're so good at
Mhm.
this, but I never want my podcast to be like anybody else's. You know, it's just,
Okay.
right.
I
I
don't think
want
it
to,
could, Harlan.
I want to
You are
throw
such a
you.
wonderful person on your in your own wonderful way. Let's do it.
But I don't think I'm capable of it being, okay, we're just gonna, here we go. This is one
Yeah.
of my favorite questions that somebody,
Okay.
they wrote to me last summer, and I want your answer, okay?
Okay.
All right, let's do it. I just found out that my freshman daughter's boyfriend has been going to her college several times a week to spend the night in her dorm with her. Hmm.
Mm.
I'm beyond mad. We paid an extra $2,000 for her to have a single room, not so she can play house with her boyfriend. Advice, please.
And well, the question I have, of course, like I'm a clinician, so I'm like, what is
Yeah.
the parent mad about? Right? Like, are they mad? Is the parent mad that this is happening, that she's worried that her kid's having sex? Is the parent mad that the daughter didn't ask or didn't, share this information when it started? So I'm kind of curious about that. But I will tell you just in terms of my straight up reaction to this, um, as the mother of two daughters, actually, we have to accept that our kids are going to end up in romantic relationships and hopefully want for our kids to end up in romantic relationships, especially ones that are happy and monogamous and sounds like long term. And so I'm not sure what the objection is, and there may be, much more to the story that would help me understand this objection.
Sure.
But my first blush response is, it's kind of nice to think about your kid having an ongoing, over time, hopefully caring relationship with one person, and that's the shape of her romantic life as a college freshman. I think a lot of families would really wish for that for their kids, as opposed to the alternative forms of romantic life that
Yeah.
we may not be that into.
I think it's a wonderful answer. This question, when I read this when I'm doing events,
Mm,
there's laughter, there's discomfort, because it's so many things wrapped in
yeah.
one. It's, the loss of control, the reality of my child becoming an adult. Um, the there's the money part too.
Mm,
A lot of parents will hold money as a
hmm.
way to control and try to protect their kids or themselves from feeling uncomfortable. It's a very tricky thing. And then there's just this part of the parent, are they in their child's corner,
Mm.
helping them to ask really important questions to protect themselves, to be smart, to be safe, to avoid unnecessary risks? Or are they a parent who is a gotcha parent
Hmm.
who is now trying to figure out how to solve a problem? And that's exactly where you started, is what's the problem?
Yeah. But I love how you like just quickly get into like there's so many facets to this question, and there's so many assumptions built into the question that we actually want to stand back and be like, okay, wait, what's getting assumed here? That because you paid for something, you have certain rights, that, your kid shouldn't be doing this, that, like it's very impressive the way you can quickly show us all the layers that are kind of built into a question like this.
Well, I mean, I know the question, and I've been, playing around with this question for a while. So it's nice so you can say it's impressive, but I've had a lot of time to process this and think about it from all these different angles. So I could take that, but as someone who, also challenges feeling enough and has a hard time taking a compliment, I have to deflect it because
Take it.
I,
Take
I
it.
know, I know, Lisa, I need to take it. This is why my therapist, we talk about this, and I need to take it. So thank you. That's very
Sure.
kind of you. And I think that it is so many situations wrapped up in one. Now I'm going to move on to another one.
Hmm.
Okay, we got another one. So this isn't, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but this always stirs the pot. Ooh, people get so upset about this. And the tip is if you're a parent who's paying for your child's education, it doesn't mean you need to check their grades,
Hmm.
especially if they're in college. Grades should be something that a student wants to achieve because it's important to them. But there could be times where you would need to check or want to check. But as a general rule, why do you need to check?
Hmm.
What are your
Hmm.
thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Okay, so first of all, I think an oversimplified answer, but the start of an answer is if you feel like you need to supervise your students' academics in order for those academics to go acceptably well, it raises questions for me about whether the kid is actually college ready. That, I think for me, and I don't spend time in this space like you do, you have much more experience and a much more nuanced perspective on this. I sort of feel like, sending a kid to college comes with certain assumptions that should be in place, like they can keep themselves safe. You can count on them to exercise good judgment. You can count on them to actually make good use of the opportunity that going to college presents, right? And I think if those are big giant question marks, I'm as big a fan of a gap year as anybody you're going to ever meet, while those question marks, I think, get sorted out. Now that's the easy answer. Now the harder answer is you do have kids who are like basically college ready, or it makes more sense for them to go to college than to not go to college. And yet there may be lingering concerns about their ability in terms of their maturation to, make good use of the opportunity to go to college. So I think there, my guidance would be to be very, very direct about that dilemma. One of the things I love about adolescence is you can just play your cards face up and you can say, you know what? I'm not entirely sure you're college ready, but we're going to let you go if you want to go, right? I mean, I think you could say that. And the nice thing is to say to a kid, in my experience, I'm not sure you're entirely college ready. You can point to data that is raising your concerns, right? Like, we're still
Right.
the ones reminding you to turn in your work, or you failed that class. And like, so you're on the fence, kiddo, in terms of readiness. And then I think there might be more of an argument to say, like, so you're for your first year, we're going to ask you to share your grades because if this is starting to go south, we want to know sooner rather than later. Like, there
Yeah.
needs to be some rationale, but not just, hi, police state, I'm going to get your grades.
It's interesting. Now, what comes to mind is storytelling, how a
Mhm.
parent tells a story. And I was doing an event, actually, it was in the Cincinnati area, and there was a parent who came up after the event and said, Harlan, thanks for the event. I'm just so worried about my child. They've exercised questionable judgment when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to
Mhm.
relationships. Uh, they insist on going to college, and I'm just telling them that this isn't going to work and they're going to just end up back at home on the couch. And I just don't think they should go. And then I want to share with you my answer and also relate it to what you just shared because I share this genuinely being curious and respecting your point of view and how I address it because maybe I need to tweak it. But I said to the parent, I said, thank you so much. I really appreciate your concerns, and I understand that. I really, I hear you. It's scary and it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And then I said, can I tell you how I also really feel? And do I have your permission to really tell you what else I'm thinking? And the
Mhm.
parent said, yes. And I said, the story you're telling your daughter, the person who knows her the best and loves her probably the most, is that she doesn't know how to be successful. She's not going to be
Mm,
successful, that she's going and she's going to make the same choices she made in the past, and she's not going to have a successful experience. So the story you're telling her, while it's a story you're probably telling to protect yourself from being vulnerable and getting hurt, is really a story that doesn't instill a lot of confidence and help her to be successful. So, is there any way you can change your story? And then the alternative story is, can you tell her, I'm really excited for you, and this is a new chapter. I'm also really concerned because there have been these events that happened in the past, and the story is that if you find yourself doing any of these things, you're going to find someone to help you and you're going to find a place where you
mm,
can be supported. And you're going to make some mistakes, but you're going to learn from these mistakes because you are at a different level of maturity and you're going to
mhm,
make it work, even though it's going to be really hard and difficult at times. And I believe in you,
mhm,
right? Which is super scary for a parent who doesn't
mhm,
necessarily believe. The connection point is to the parent who is having that conversation with the student about grades and saying, I don't think you're college ready
mhm,
because of X, Y, and Z. Is that parent telling a story
mm,
of I don't believe in you and have the confidence in you, and the
mhm,
self-fulfilling prophecy is you're gonna meet my expectations,
mhm,
which are that you're not gonna be successful,
mhm.
or and you also framed it in a way where it isn't completely that, but
Yeah,
I
no,
wanted to
it's a
get your take
great,
on that.
I love this conversation. Okay, so there's a lot I love about what you just said. And I think that, one of the rules that I live by is that teens live up to expectations and they live down to expectations, right? And so if you're like, you're going to mess this up, that's not a good way to send a kid to college, right? Like that's just, it feels bad on so many levels. Now, the point counterpoint on this is as a practicing clinician, I have over the years cared for many kids who were bounced out of their college by October or November of their freshman year because they were, you know, falling apart academically, out of control party wise. I mean, just, really just, I think we would agree, very bad outcomes.
Right.
And, they get to my office and I start to take a history and I've never seen this happen out of the blue, right? That these are kids who like were, at the end of their senior year, like skywriting that they were not taking seriously their own care and their own academics or whatever. And I would always think like, who sent you? Like, you were like, getting a billboard out and letting us know you weren't ready. So what I have done clinically, and I think this is a place where it's not that we have to come to agreement. I think this is a place where you and I both are like, oh, this is a really interesting problem. Here's a variety of solutions that one could use based on what you know about your kid, right? I think that that's like anytime, there's no one size fits
Yeah.
all. So the solution that I've come to from watching this is if I see a kid who is, making mistakes and not showing good judgment, and like here we are, senior year of high school, here we are, they've been accepted somewhere. I will say to families, based on your behavior right now, you are letting us know you are not college ready. We will give you time to show us that you can take good care of yourself, that you can, be as serious about the opportunity that college presents. If we see another incident like this before August, before, I mean, like
Yeah.
you're taking the year just so that you don't end up having the, in a jam
Yeah.
that, and I think I would reasonably say, like, I think you could say, we're not really doing our job as parents if, you know, weeks before you're supposed to go to college, you are showing us that you cannot hold up your end of the deal on college, which is to take very good care of yourself. So it gives kids a chance to pull it together. And my sense, and I've seen this, kids so badly want to go to college with their cohort that you see them mature many months or years in a very short period of time. So that's how I've handled it clinically.
Yeah.
But I won't say that's the way, that's the only way, this is the one right answer, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways to get this
Yeah.
right and a lot of contextual information that will change what might be a good approach.
So when you were sharing that, I was feeling really big feelings for parents
Mm,
who are really concerned about their kids' behaviors and the idea that like they know they've made questionable choices. And now this idea of as a parent, do I set a boundary and say, you haven't exhibited the behavior that would communicate that you're ready for this. Therefore, I think that you should take some more time. Man, I'm like, because that parent who I, that parent who I was communicating with, there really needed to be a conversation, not in May,
Right.
but a conversation in December or a conversation in October saying, hey, I love you and I want you to have all the things that you want to experience.
Hmm.
But as a parent, how can I put you in a
Yeah.
situation where you haven't demonstrated that you can make
Yeah.
healthy, responsible choices? So therefore, let's see how this year goes.
Give them enough runway, letting them
Yeah,
know what the real, I agree with you
that's the tricky
totally.
part with that. And then for those parents who are like, damn, Lisa and Harlan, this sucks that you brought this up because my kid's been, my kid, what would constitute exhibiting behavior that's over the line where
Hmm.
they're not healthy enough or responsible enough. And have I given them that room? I don't know the answer. It's like
Yeah.
it's really tricky. It brings up a lot of questions because, and I didn't even know what I was going to. I wasn't even planning on talking to you about this. But the part of like knowing if your kid is ready, this is the hardest part for me. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm going to be very be abstract and or make generalization, a general narrative of a parent who has a child who has a history of dealing with challenges. They are a little nervous because they've struggled managing social anxiety, managing
Hmm.
transition, change in the past. They want to go to college. The parent wants them to go to college, or maybe the parent wants them to go to college more than the kid wants them to go. But it's like, this is the next thing you do. And then the kid gets there and really struggles.
Hmm.
How long does a parent
Hmm.
give that kid to struggle? And at what point do you say, hey, you know what? It's 3 weeks in, you're miserable. This is awful. Maybe we just need to do a reset. How do you manage that? I know it's a hard question.
No, I think actually, okay, so
It's an easy, let me rephrase that. I bet you have an answer. This is an easy question.
no, I don't think it's easy, but I do think so, Harlan, as we're thinking about like, I agree with you, first of all, just back on the other question, like the longer runway you can give a kid to be like, you know what, if you're still doing this when the time comes for you to go to college, like you're going to be taking a year. We need to see that you can take good care of yourself and before that, before we send you to college. I think a long runway is an incredibly generous thing. And I'll tell you, and you know this, and I'm sure your audience knows this, part of what has motivated my, I would say, fairly like hardcore approach on this is how how hard it is if a college asks you to leave, how hard it is to reset, right? That you have to share that with any college you apply to. Your grades don't go away. I mean, like, what you've done sometimes transfers, often doesn't. Like, I mean, just I
You mean if
think,
they force you, not if a student decides to withdraw?
yeah, right. If this college says you are no longer
Right.
enrolled here, right? It is so much messier than people think it's going to be. And so I am on the side of like, let's prevent that. Okay, which then ties to your second question, which about like a kid having a hard time. Okay, so for me, there's a real distinction between a kid having a hard time, but there are no safety concerns for that kid, versus a kid having a hard time with like real safety concerns. Like that is, I unfortunately I've seen it, right? So that is a concern, or the real possibility that the university may kick them out. If there are real safety concerns or the university might kick them out, I get much more activated and much more get the kid home, step in, don't let this unfold into a situation that is going to be very, very hard to repair down the line. Now, different, I think what you're describing is a kid who gets to college and like it's not going well. They are unhappy, they are uncomfortable, but they're safe. They're not on the university's radar. I think there you have more room to work, right? What supports can you put around the kid at school? What resources at school have they not yet tapped? Um, I think you've got a little more time, you've got a little more latitude, because the consequence of that version of things not going well is so different from the consequence that ends up in my office, which is the kid who was asked to leave.
Right. So safety concerns, just so other parents can
Mhm.
have a sense of what does that mean? What does that mean to you?
What it means to me is, you know, if you're getting a call that your kid's, an ambulance took your kid out of a party, right? Or if you're getting a call from your kid's roommate, that your kid is like, has a, flourishing eating disorder. Um, or if you're getting information that your kid is so, struggling, in terms of managing their emotions, that there's questions about their ability to keep themselves safe with themselves. And this, of course, like, this is sort of the benefit, I think, but maybe the cost, but I think it's mostly a benefit of having just practiced a long time. Like, I know what the worst case scenario looks like, and you don't want this for your kid.
Yeah. So one of the ways to be proactive, and last time we talked, I was looking, it was in August of 2023,
Mm.
and I was talking about a mental health transition plan.
Mhm.
And part of it was having a therapist, having someone who your student can talk to other than you,
Mhm.
who can assess where they are and to also have an agreement with your kid if it reaches a certain point, or finding a way where they have they can talk to someone that's independent of the parent. But the question of, and this is the question I've answered because it happens every fall, it's the parent says, my kid wants to come home, they want to leave, it's been 3 weeks. And of course, I'm not a clinician, so the questions of safety and all of that, I say, do they have a therapist? Are they working with someone? If they don't have a therapist, to have someone who could just assess, what is the danger, what is the
Mhm.
threat, and I think that's what you're saying. But for a parent who doesn't have a therapist or doesn't have someone
Mhm.
who's in that kid's corner, how do they make that assessment?
Well, one thing, if the kid's like, I really want to leave. I mean, if we're at that point of like, bring
This
me
is it.
home.
Like situation, like social anxiety, student gets there, they're just not feeling it. They're
Yeah.
crying every day. They're
Mhm.
homesick. They want to come home.
Mhm.
And this is very common. Like the thing,
Yeah.
like parents who have kids who are going to college, like this is not unusual.
Yeah. This is,
But
yeah.
like, how do you? Because I'm the person. I'll tell you, and this is where I need to work. Maybe as it's coming up, I'll reach out to you again because I'll talk. I'll say I'm willing to talk. I'm happy to talk. I listen, and I listen as
Mhm.
more of a coach.
Mhm.
And I'm like, why does this kid need to be so uncomfortable?
Mhm.
Like, why? Who said that at 18, at
Right.
this point in your life, you have to be in this enormous amount of pain?
Yeah.
And you know, I'm like, well, they could leave. They can go to community college.
Yeah.
They could. There's lots of different things. There's no race, and so that's like my
Yeah.
default. Like, why do that? They're going to be great.
Yeah.
But then but then I've seen that they don't they don't come home,
Mhm.
and then they work through it in the next couple months and they're okay. And I'm like,
They're fine.
damn, like,
Just
what
can't
could I,
know.
right? Like, how do you,
Yeah.
what do
Well,
you think
so,
about me answering that? Or what, I want to understand through your lens.
okay. So I think you're right, right? Like, I actually agree with every single thing you've said. And just to underscore some of it, so for years I was on the faculty at the University of Michigan and I taught psychology courses. And so then my office hours would often be less about what happened in class and more about like, lovely students who would stop by to like talk about what they were struggling with. And I would say to kids who were just tanking and didn't want to, I would say, listen, where it's nowhere written that somehow magically between 18 and 22, every single person is ready for college in that one window. Like that makes no sense. And I would say, you should be here when you want to be here, right? You only get to do this for so long. So be here when you can actually really make the most of what this university has to offer. You know, you don't have to do this now. Like I would say that constantly.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I also am like the world's biggest fan of half steps, right? If you're like, this situation feels like it could go either way, like, in 2 weeks the kid could be happy, or, this kid could be
Right.
miserable in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, well, what has not been activated that could be activated? And you know better than I do. At this point, universities have very well built out systems for supporting students. So I think I would, if I were the parent on the other end of that phone call, be like, Who have you talked to at the university? Do you have an RA you like? Do you have a freshman dean you like? Do you have an office of student support that you've checked in with? Do you have an advisor you could talk to? Right? Like, there are so many adults and young adults at that university who know the fullness of the available resources, who may be able to be like, you know what you should do? You should totally start going to this meeting with this
Um,
club. You're going to love it. I think we forget that it's not just the kid alone in their room calling us. It's the kid in the context of a university, which certainly even since the time you and I were in college, have continued to build out their supports for students.
they do have those. And then I think of, so I tell this to parents, and the frequency of my voice falls in a different place in a kid's brain
Mm-hmm.
than their parents'
Mm-hmm.
voice. Just like my kids hear my voice, probably like static sometimes. And because I say these
Yeah.
things, and parents are like, Harlan, you have helped. I can't even tell how much you've helped. And I'm saying a lot of the same things that
Yeah,
they're saying.
exactly. That's what a lot of therapy is, right? I say the same things the families are saying, but I'm not their mother.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
there's something about, I don't know if anyone's ever studied like what part of the brain receives frequency from a parent's
I
voice
think there are
versus,
researchers. I think there is research on
is
this,
it?
on
Because it's
like
got,
maternal voice and its impact on the adolescent brain.
right, and like where it hits
Yeah.
or at least how much they listen or the closing of where it hits in the brain and the closing of the ears. Like maybe
Yes.
there's like a video where it's like, zoop.
Yes.
But, but when I say this, so then I say this to the parent and think of the parent who's like listening to this at a point where you really need answers. And there are those resources. There's the RA, there's the peer mentors, there's the stuff that I do. We've lots of resources. The parent tells the kid, these are the things that we want you to do, but the kid just can't do it. The kid is
Hmm.
too afraid, they're really beaten up. It's really hard for them to take that next step.
Hmm.
And while we want them to take the half step, they just won't take that half step.
Hmm.
Then what does a parent do?
So what I would say is I wouldn't back a kid into a corner in a phone call. I wouldn't say to them, you need to do this, 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 or this. I think like you said, like that is loaded, that is charged. And I think a lot of teenagers would be like, I cannot, right? Like, no. Like, I just, like, there would be like a first
Hmm.
reaction of like, that's, what you're asking is impossible.
Right.
Um, I think this is a small adjustment that can get a big result, which is
Yep.
to say, like, I hear you that this sounds really awful and that this is, that this is miserable. Here are all of the things I can think of that you might do just, before we come get you. I'd love for you to think about one of these things. And these are just the things I can think of. You may know of more resources, but don't decide now which one you might consider. Don't even
Yeah.
assume that my list is the complete one, but let's come up with one thing for you to try before we do anything drastic.
Yeah.
And why don't we talk tomorrow or the next day about the one thing you're going to try, but you get to decide what that one thing is. This is a list I can think of. You come up with a list too, and we'll choose something.
Right.
Um, I've learned like one of the questions I'm asking adolescents and sometimes helping parents ask their own teenagers is, when a kid talks about something that's going on, is this situation uncomfortable or unmanageable? Right? Like that's a really nice question to ask. But what's interesting, a lot of teenagers will be like, it's unmanageable. But like,
Right.
10 minutes later, like, well, actually, I could do this. So I think there's value in saying, do not answer this right now, but
Yeah.
here's the assessment we're trying to make. Is this uncomfortable or unmanageable? Why don't you chew on it for 24 hours? Let's talk tomorrow.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice. And it's much more manageable. And it's just that one thing. What's one thing you
Yeah.
can do?
Yeah.
And then the question of what. I spend a lot of time when I'm talking to students and parents, this idea of what do you want? And even
Hmm.
when I'm talking to students about college, and I'll have them raise their hand and say, how many of you have parents who have asked you if you want to go to college, who are going to
Hmm.
college, right? The majority of them, don't have parents who have asked them, do you want to go to college? Because it's
It's assumed.
where are you going to college,
Yeah.
right? So this idea of want,
Hmm.
even if there's things that we want and we know are best for our children, the idea of just hitting the pause button and asking them the question, what do you want to do?
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
do you think of that?
I think it's great. I think it's great. And um, what it reminds me of, what it reminds me of, so for years, for 20 years, I consulted to a private school in my community, a girls' school. And I was there about a day and a half a week, and I loved it. I loved it. And I just, the rest of my career took over, and I haven't been able to maintain it because it, requires being able to respond quickly to things. And what it reminds me of, Harlan, is that every once in a while we'd have a student who was tanking, absolutely just imploding. And we would get in these meetings and like all of these loving adults would like come up with all of these solutions. Like we're gonna get this tutor and we're gonna get this therapist and we're gonna get this, and then we're gonna like da da da. And that it would not be rare that like it just felt like we were throwing resources into a black hole. Like everything we would try would just like
Yeah.
somehow fail or somehow the kid would sabotage it. And so I started doing this thing. And again, it's like this is like the beauty of having been a clinician for 30 years is you like stumble into something and you're like, oh, this is the way to do it. Having messed it up for many years, this is the way to do it. I started saying to students before we started these grand plans, I would say, do you want our help? You have gotten yourself into quite a jam. Do you want our help getting out of it? This, again, because no one asks. And every once in a while, a kid be like, no, I don't want to go to school here. Right? And you're like, so glad I asked, right?
Right.
Before we dump hundreds of dollars worth of resources, like, great, let's solve that problem.
Yeah.
But to get the kid to say, yes, I want your help, right? Like, which usually they would say, right? But they had to think about it for a minute.
Yeah.
And it was again, what it turned it into is something that the kid was saying, all right, I don't like where I'm at, and I will take the support versus kid, here comes the cavalry. We're throwing this at you. We're not even asking if you want it. That question, like literally, that took 30 seconds, I found dramatically changed the outcomes when the help was then offered.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's the connection of agency. I
Yeah.
think teenagers really want control.
Yes.
And that simple question of what do
Yes.
you want? And I think like I have a list, Lisa. Oh my gosh, I do so much prep for this. Like I asked,
You are so lovely.
well, I just I'm so curious. I want to know what people want to know, and there's things
Mhm.
that I want to know, and there are so many questions that parents asked, and I think most of them can be connected to that question of asking your student, what do you want?
Yeah.
And then how do you see that working?
I love that. How do you see that working? Okay, so let's right, this is fun, Harlan. Let's like brainstorm our best lines. Okay, so I love the what do you want? And I can imagine saying like, okay, you're headed to college. What do you want this experience to be like for you?
Yeah.
Like to articulate that. How do you see that working is brilliant, right? For like, I want to like, maybe they say something that feels overambitious or unrealistic. My two best questions, one as a clinician, one as a mother, that I have in my toolkit. As a clinician, I think the question I use more than any other is what's getting in the way of what it is you say you want to do?
Mm,
It kids want to succeed, they want to have friends, they want to, like all sorts of things. And we start giving them tons of advice. And I have found sort of walking it back and saying, what's getting in the way of you taking better care of yourself? What's getting in the way of you doing your homework? What's getting in the way? Like that,
yeah.
what's getting in your way? Like that's all the magic of everything is found there. As a mother of teenagers, I will tell you the question that like if I were limited to one question as a parent that I could ask my kids, it would just be this one. When they're super upset, saying, is there anything I can do that won't make it worse?
Yeah.
This like is a magical question.
That's such a good question.
Because you're like, I'm here for it, well aware I'm likely to step in it. So
Gosh,
what do you need?
that question would have helped me so many times because I make things worse.
We
Oh,
do, all of us do. And so
oh,
that's
I'm
just like,
so
it's
good
such
at
a
that.
nice, it's
Oh,
such a like effective little
oh.
question.
Then I feel so bad. And then I have the
Yeah.
conversation of
Well,
outcome and intention don't always
yes,
align.
exactly. So just don't even try. Is there anything I can do that won't make it worse?
Is there anything I could do that won't make it
And
worse?
usually it kind of cracks kids up too. They're like, oh yeah, you know how this works. And like you're
Right.
already into a different space.
Yeah. Those are great. Those are great questions. Okay. So I have like 10 more minutes here with you, and I know we could talk for hours and
We could.
hours. Oh my goodness. This year I became a college parent, Lisa. I did.
Congratulations.
I did. My oldest is in college. He's a freshman. And I saw the blue bags. I don't know if you've seen those blue bags. When kids go to
Are
college, you've
they
seen.
are they IKEA bags or something
They're
like
like
big
so,
giant?
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many, but they're like the big
Yeah.
packing instead of suitcases. These big blue bags, and they're sitting in our dining room, and I'm pretty good at this. I've been in space for a while, and then it was a couple days before he left, and I saw the blue bags, and I just started like, started crying. I started swearing at the blue bags. I'm like, you effing blue bags. I effing hate you, effing blue bags. And no one was around. Like,
Yeah.
no one was around. And then, and I shared with my wife because I like to solve problems and process my feelings later.
Hmm.
Information is not emotional. Information is data, although information is emotional. That was a whole other thing that I had a debate with my wife and son because I sometimes I'll say information is not emotional, but they're like, well, when you say that, then you're negating the fact that information is deeply emotional. But at the core, information is data and how we process it. And the more mindful we can be and understanding of ourselves, I think, then the more distance we can put between the information and emotion. But it's not to deny information is it can be and it is anyway. So I make that's
Yep. I'm
right.
with you.
We went through that because they're like, you're denying that this. I'm like, no, I didn't mean to. Anyway, so uh, I shared it with my wife, and I shared it with my son too. I told him like I really lost it today. I was really sad.
Mm.
Like I'm gonna miss you so much. And I'm so excited for you, but I also wanted him to know that I was sad because I think it's really important he knows I was sad. But then when he left, and it's not too terribly far away, I I was so upset. Like
Mm.
so upset. My wife was so upset. And it's like this is a kid who's ready and set up.
Hmm.
It was a full body experience,
Yeah.
full body experience. And I have been talking about this for years and have helped people for years. But to experience it and to be in it was so overwhelming, full body experience. And then it connects to you. And one of my favorite things that you share is a steady parent.
Hmm.
Steady parent is a really helpful parent, a parent who
Like a
knows
steady presence.
steady
Yeah.
presence, a steady
Yeah.
presence. It's one of the greatest gifts you can give your child is to have a steady presence. But then there's this question of like, how can I be steady when I'm such a mess? And when do I prepare to be steady? And how do we do this, Lisa?
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, sometimes I think we're faking it. I think sometimes you're a steady presence and sometimes you're faking being a steady presence because your kid needs you to be, they're themselves upset and they need you to be somebody they can go to for reassurance. Um, I also think there's real value in our kids seeing that we love them and miss them. My older daughter's a college junior, and I actually was doing okay with her leaving as long as we had a to-do list. As long as there was something we still needed to manage or get or, register for or sign up for, like I'm like the queen of tasks, right? So I was like, do, 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 do. And then we went out to dinner the night before we drove her to college with my in-laws who live in town, and we had a big, like goodbye dinner for my kid. And then we came home, and then I was saying goodnight, and there was nothing left to do. The next day was get in the car and drive day. And that's when I lost it. I was like saying goodnight to her, and I just like, whoa, it all like hit me so hard. And, I don't think, I wasn't coming apart at the seams. And of course, I'm sure my daughter was like, oh, here we go. But I also like, they, wouldn't it be weird if we were like, all right, you're going to college tomorrow? Like, I got no feelings about this, right? Like, I think our kids would be like, really? Like, nothing? So I think it's okay to be emotional with our kids or in front of our kids. I think it's mostly when they're upset that
Yeah,
we need to be a steady presence,
yeah,
or we
yeah,
should try to be.
yeah. And I think that's harder and harder when we have more and more information. And it connects to a question of being a gotcha back parent
Hmm.
and a gotcha parent.
Oh, I love that distinction. That's great. Yeah.
So the gotcha back parent recognizes that, life's uncomfortable. You're going to be dealing with new experiences, and I need to give you the freedom to make mistakes and to
Hmm.
learn from those. The gotcha parent, you know, with the tracking devices,
Mm.
with ways to stay in touch. And there are parents who, will send me messages saying, I just can't help but look. And
Hmm.
my answer is, okay, look, but then what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Wait, like, yeah.
So, how do you help a parent when they have so much access and so much fear? How do you help a parent know how to use that to
Mm.
be a steady presence versus a mess?
Well, I think we should trouble the question of whether you should be tracking your college age kid. I don't think I don't work with the assumption that that is something that all parents can or
Oh,
should, should be doing.
just to jump in
Yeah.
through, like, if you have their cell phone, if they're on your cell
Yeah.
phone, like you see like the Find My. So it's not even like enabling something. It's like we're so connected and tethered now
Yeah.
that sometimes it's not even about initiating something. It's just there.
Right. But you have to decide to share your location, even with
Yeah.
Find My.
Well, safety. Then there's the parents that, it's a safety issue because I don't really care. My kid, I don't look to try and do
Yeah.
it. I just look to make sure that like they're safe or in a place with there are boundaries, that I set, but I don't want this to be about me.
Yeah.
But I think the thing I'm now defending the idea of having access
Hmm.
because I think it's unrealistic for parents to not have that. And I know that you also don't keep your cell phone in your room, and I
Yeah.
and I do,
Yeah.
and I shouldn't, and I keep doing it, and I know it's like for some reason I just can't do that right now. So
Well, I'm very rarely prescriptive, and I'm not going to say there's never a reason, to know your college kid's location. Like
right,
I think that, there are circumstances where it makes, I will
right,
defer to families. At the same time, I
yeah,
think your question is the key one, which is like, okay, so what are you going to do? Right? Like what are you going to do with that information? And
yeah,
one question, I wrote a piece about this for the Times a long time ago about like, should you track your kid and what does it mean to
yeah,
track your kid? I think there is a little bit of an issue of it makes murky who is responsible for the kid's safety, right? The parent who is 2 states away or the kid who is at college. Like the kid who is at college is responsible for the kid's safety. And I think we want to really put the pressure on them to own that responsibility. Now, of course, there are kids who have type 1 diabetes and can end up in a medical crisis. And like, it doesn't make sense to be like, good luck, kiddo, right? Like, I mean, there's really, very
yeah,
real parameters. So that's why I'm like, I'm not going to say that there's a
sure,
single answer. Um, but I do think we need to be mindful that raising kids in a digital universe means that we have a lot more information about our kids than we ever did before. And the analogy I have made at times, Harlan, you know how like it's possible to get a full body CT scan? And you
yeah,
know how doctors are like, don't do it.
don't do
Don't
it,
do it. You will find things you don't need to know. And
right,
then you will do an invasive procedure. And then you will have, like a complication from the invasive procedure that you never needed to have. I think we need to think about our ability to track kids, our ability to look at what they're doing on their phones as a little bit like a full body CT scan, right? Like, yes, in theory, could it catch something terrible? But also, does it mean we're going to come across information that is upsetting and anxiety provoking that we never needed to have and is not actually a problem? And I think that's why I'm not going to be prescriptive about this, but I just think like those are the kinds of things that need to
yeah,
be made when making these choices.
yeah. You know, it just reminds me that as a parent who is parenting today, we're dealing with challenges no other parents have dealt with,
Yes, it's totally different, right? Our
and
parents had no idea where we were and had no way
right,
to know where we were.
right, and the answers are being discovered, and it's conversation like this, and it's not judging, but learning and being
Yeah.
curious and trying to understand. Because when you're saying this as well, the other part I'm like is, kids love tracking their parents.
Yes, they do.
Like that's a
Yes, they do.
wild thing.
Yeah.
They'll be like at the grocery store and they'll be like, "Hey,
Because you
can
get
you get this
me.
and send me this?" Right?
Yes.
Or like, "Why aren't you home?" You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and it's like this reverse thing of like, did the parents need to then, stop my kids from tracking me? Uh, That because I get that a lot when we
Yeah,
do
no,
that, and
it's
the
a
kid's like,
really
"I've
funny
lo-"
question.
it makes them feel good. It's like
Yeah.
I'm far away and I know my
I know
parents.
that you're right there in the kitchen where I want you.
Right, they're at Trader Joe's, and
Yes.
I really need
Yeah.
those. They've got these rice cakes now with chocolate. Oh my God, I have
Mm.
them right here. I've been trying not to eat a lot of these things, but this is, I don't know if you've seen
Oh,
these. They're
that looks great.
dark chocolate rice cake thins. Anyway, all right, Lisa, I got one more question for
Sure.
you because I want to respect your time. Thank you for everything. I really
Oh,
appreciate you. And
Harlan, thank you for all you do.
like, I just, gosh, this is so good. This is so good. There's so few people I could talk to who I could like really get a deep, insightful perspective from to because sometimes I feel very lonely and like
Mm.
there's not a lot of people who do what I do.
Well,
And
and I appreciate you asking hard questions. These are hard questions.
yeah, well, I think, as much as I do this for the people who are listening, it's like I do this because like I just, these things are complex and I'm
Yeah.
always trying to find different people. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's wrap our conversation up with a very easy question. So for our transgender
Hmm.
students, non-binary,
Hmm.
which is also categorized as transgender, depending,
Hmm.
who you're talking to are gay, lesbian, bisexual, our students of particular religions, of
Hmm.
race, different race, uh, our students who feel targeted, our students
Hmm.
who feel unsafe, our students who are supposed to navigate these other worlds on their own without having that sense of security.
Hmm.
How do you advise the parents and how do
Mm.
you advise the students? What is the message? How can we help them?
So I think we start with a word you said, which is questions of safety. If you're not actually safe, nothing else matters. And so I think if a student, for any reason, is bringing across a question of safety, and you mentioned it from the standpoint of like a bunch of kids who are very marginalized or maybe targeted, that needs to be assessed very, very directly. Because so long as a kid feels unsafe, if that is real, it must be addressed. Like there's no solution beyond fixing that. You fix
Right,
that.
right.
So then the question becomes, is that real? And it may be real. What needs to be done to get that kid to, a place where they are truly safe? And then what I would say is, and this may be connected to the safety question, community. It's really critical
Yeah,
if you are marginalized to feel that you have a sense of belonging, that you have a sense of community. This can confer a sense of safety, but that is, what we have to strive for and help these kids make sure they've got and that they feel really solid in.
yeah. And directing them to their places,
Yes.
directing them to their people. I like to direct them to where the love is. You find the love,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that is where you connect. And if you're unsure of the level of safety as a parent, connecting with those people who are in those places,
Yeah.
who are there to support our students, and you're one of these people.
Well,
And
thank you.
I am so grateful for you, your podcast. For people who want to hear more of you, I'm sure they know. So many people say how much they love you, and when I ask them what I should ask, they're like, just tell her how much she's helped me.
Oh, that's so kind.
There were so many of those,
Yeah.
but the podcast, your Ask Lisa podcast, is
Mhm.
is wonderful, and there are so many great archives where very prescriptive information, and then your Untangling Family Life newsletter, and
Yeah.
I urge everyone to check that out. And you actually like work on that yourself, right?
I write it myself. It's basically what I do each weekend is I sit down and work really, really hard on it, but I do write it
Yeah.
myself. Comes out every Monday. It is free. People can sign up on my website, which is drlisadamour.com. The podcast, we're, well over 200 episodes. And Harlan, this is really fun. Recently, and YouTube is the best way to find this, we took our episodes and we curated many of them into playlists on YouTube.
Good.
So there's actually a playlist on going to college. There's a playlist on how to stay connected to your teen, raising, sons, raising daughters. There's a playlist on sex and, romance and sex and drugs and alcohol. And like, I mean, we just really took all of these things that we have worked on and put them into categories. So if people are like, okay, 200 episodes seems like a lot to sort
Yeah.
through, that is, right there on our YouTube page. You can, go to the playlist tab and find very, very specific information.
It's great. You have so much great info. And then if someone has a question and they can't ask you directly, which it's sometimes hard to get a hold of you because, you're so busy and you do so many different things. Rosalie
Yes.
is your AI
She's my
alter
AI
ego
powered, she's my AI powered librarian.
librarian.
Yeah,
Okay.
librarian. She is an AI powered bot librarian named by my daughter, who was 13 when she named her. Um, and basically, Harlan, what I did is I took all of my books and all of my transcripts for my podcasts and all of the pieces I wrote for the New York Times. I wrote like nearly 100, all of my newsletters, dumped it into a gated environment that Rosalie searches to answer questions. So if you have a question at 2 o'clock in the morning, I just found vapes. You can ask Rosalie, and she'll say, "Here's what Lisa recommends about vaping." She'll give you a, short answer to get you started. And then she will say, "Here's the podcast on that topic that Lisa did. Here's the New York Times piece on that topic that Lisa wrote." So she only directs you to the work I have done, and her answers are grounded in my work.
Good. That is so great. And I'm going to use that too to refer parents and families because you have so much wonderful insight. And there's so many questions that I didn't ask that I think would be a wonderful opportunity for me to, reach out to Rosalie
Yeah, see
and
what she says.
yeah, I'll even demo it and just like send it to you. But I know you're getting answers and you said that are constantly working to make this something
Yeah.
that's vibrant and up to date and it is and I just think it's wonderful. So I'm excited for that. I want to do that for what I'm doing. So I want to learn more about
Yeah.
that. And with that, is there anything else you wanted to include before I say goodbye?
No, other than just to say Rosalie is free, my newsletter is free, my podcast is free. Please, please, tell your friends, right? I have done one thing my whole career, and at this point have a good volume of work and have answered a lot of questions, and I don't want people to feel like they have to do this alone.
What a gift. What a blessing. I'm just so lucky that I get to visit with you and you're so kind. You're also so kind and encouraging. So thank you for being in my corner. Thank you for being in so many families' corners. And
Harlan, same to you. Same to you. You're such a lovely human being.
oh, well, I'm going to, because I need to appreciate compliments and kind words. I'll say thank you so much,
You're
and we'll put
welcome.
it to be continued, and we'll do this again sometime with if you're open to it.
Of course. Of course.
Thank you.
You bet.